Welcome back to the Out of Spec Podcast, everyone. I am very excited for today's episode as I am joined by another leader in the space of going electric. She has incredible experience, over a decade of work under her belt, collaborating with some of the top OEM brands on major products, marketing, branding, and essential trainings. She is a major proponent of electric mobility in general and does a great job of spreading the good word, if you ask me. She helps cover industry news on the Inside EVs podcast, and of course is a source for everything from electric news to reviews to interviews and more on her Miss Go Electric YouTube channel and her other platforms. So make sure you go and check her out if you haven't already. Welcome, Laycee, aka Miss Go Electric, to the Out of Spec Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Francie. It's good to see another female in the business. So I'm really excited that you've taken the helm here at the podcast. So let's go.
Yes, we love women in STEM. Just kidding. But yeah, I really do love to see women in this space that is, it's really fun. So I'm happy to have you on today. And you're calling in from your Rivian, actually, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And because this is a bit of a new experience for you, right?
Yeah, now I've spent quite a bit of time driving R1Ts, but I've had my reservation in for my Rivian R1T Max Pack since 2019. And actually, the most recent estimate for me to take delivery on my truck was January, February of this upcoming year of 2024. And all of a sudden, I got this email from Rivian that said, "Oh, can you confirm your configuration?" I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Click, 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 click away. And then it was like, oh, you finish up some of this paperwork. And I'm like, that's interesting, because usually that process doesn't happen until I'm about to take delivery. So I reached out to my guide and I was like, hey, just before I transfer the money over, like if it's just going to be taken until January, I want to wait to do that. But can you give me a heads up about like what's going on here? Should I continue filling this out? And she's like, oh yeah, we'll be able to get it to you next week. And I'm like, really? Okay.
Amazing.
So it was kind of a surprise, but yeah, I took delivery just a couple of weeks ago now. And immediately when I took delivery, I pretty much went out of town. So it sat for a couple days, but then I drove down to the Nashville area in Tennessee because I have a project going on here for like the next year that I'll be driving back and forth pretty much from Michigan to where I live to Nashville. And so that was kind of the first road trip, which I'm not a typical like driver when it comes to having like a daily commute, having a 9 to 5 that I go to on a day-to-day basis. Because as you mentioned in the intro, I've been a contractor. So car companies will hire my company and I'll go out and run a lot of education programs from this standpoint. I started early off in my career in more of the marketing space, but now I'm more in the training side of things. And so I pretty much have been doing that for so long, working for a lot of different brands, a lot of different car companies for their new product launches, and started to specialize in EVs over the course of many years in the business. And so it kind of was a natural fit to start the Miss Go Electric brand to cover all the e-mobility and electric cars, because I wanted to be able to still do my job during the pandemic when I wasn't able to. So it really created the opportunity to bring it online. And so, I was like, okay, I got to start driving this truck immediately. So I do road trips all the time. That's kind of what I do, because it's similar to kind of the Out of Spec way a little bit. I wouldn't say as much, but I only road trip. I don't do a daily commute. So I was like, let's get some miles under our belt with this.
And you sure have already. Yeah. So you're usually based in Michigan, and I have one of my best friends up there too. And, it's probably getting a little cold up there, and you're coming down to Tennessee where it's a little bit warmer, right? So that's fun.
Yes.
Yes.
Not upset about that.
No.
It's like at that stage in Michigan right now where it's like super gloomy, gray, wet, kind of nasty, about to snow for the first time. So I was not upset when I was like having to go down to Nashville. Now,
good.
I will be also going to Florida next week. So I'll be having a lot more updates as far as the charging goes. But I was kind of interested in the first trip going down. When I left my house, I was at 100% state of charge. 410 miles of range is what my R1T Max Pack Performance Dual Motor gets.
Mm-hmm.
So I filled it up all the way. It was probably about high 40s when I left, like 48-ish degrees. And so it was a little chilly, not too bad. And I was able to drive all the way down to Huber Heights, Ohio, where there was an Electrify America station. And that was 251 miles that I made it down there. It said that I had 16% state of charge left, which was estimating at about 50 miles. Now, I was not doing anything that I feel like I wanted it to be the most average experience for what most people are going to probably do in this case. So I just let the car navigate me. I did double check ABRP because Rivian did buy ABRP, and I wanted to see if they had any updates yet to kind of match those systems up. But seemed to me that they haven't quite optimized that yet, so there'll probably be some updates in the future that will. Mm-hmm. But there were two different routes for sure. And so it had me originally stopping twice along my way. I unfortunately wanted to leave super early in the morning that day and had so much work that I didn't end up leaving till the afternoon. So I left afternoon time and got in about maybe 9 o'clock, and I stopped at a hotel. So I didn't make the whole trek in one stop. But that also like provided a very interesting occurrence, because when I went to the hotel, I'm like, oh, that'll be good. I'll just fill up there and then continue to make my journey. I won't even have to stop again. But I had some issues at the hotel. But let me first explain the rest of the charging session, because I think you guys will find this really interesting, especially the nerds of the Out of Spec audience. When I plugged in, when I got to that station in Ohio, it was a 350 kilowatt station. And I plugged in at, like I said, about 16% left on my state of charge. Mm-hmm. I rode in all-purpose mode. I had auto ride height, so everything was like very normal. I actually have my e-bike rack with me that I'm going to put on the back tow hitch receiver, but I didn't yet. I put it in the bed of my car, and I did order a tonneau cover, but unfortunately I don't have that yet. So it is an open bed situation, but so just keep in mind those things. And It was raining for the first good chunk of time that I was driving through Ohio. So with all that considered, when I initially plugged in, I hit a peak rate of 208 kilowatts when I got to about 20%. So pretty quickly it ramped up to the peak rate. But then it slowly started to taper down to about 130 kilowatts. And that was up until about 45% state of charge. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then all of a sudden it jumped up to 168 kilowatts, and it held that for another 5%. And then it dropped down to 156 kilowatts. And by 60% state of charge, it had dropped to 142 kilowatts. And then it held till about 70%, and then it dropped to 110. And that's when I unplugged, because I was like, I really just wanted to go up into the point where Rivian says their daily average is the 70%. That's where you want to hold your state of charge for your daily charging. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'll set it at that and let it go. So a couple of interesting things is that curve was kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Right.
And, my R1T will tell me if it's throttled by the station or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any, I sat in the car the whole time, which to the picture that you just pulled up there, where it said how many kilowatt hours I ended up pulling from the station for that period of time. It was a 34-minute charging session. I had 91.1 kilowatt hours, but I was sitting in my car. So I thought it was kind of interesting that 1.5 kilowatt hours was expended to the cabin heat and the battery temperature. Mm-hmm. And so I've already known, I was hoping that by the time I got the Max Pack that they would re-engineer to have a more efficient vehicle. And technically they're saying that that's the case because they're using a 150 kilowatt hour battery pack and It's a new chemistry. But I was really hoping that I would see a heat pump by the time I got my car. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm okay for waiting a little bit longer if they make these efficiencies. Unfortunately, this is still not very efficient cabin heating system. So that'll be nice for Rivian to improve that over time. But it's also one of the reasons why I got the Max Pack.
Right.
I when I originally ordered it back in 2019, I had the lock-in price for the reservation holders. So when they tried to raise the price, then they were like, "Oh no, we'll leave it for you guys." So technically, I paid 80 grand for it, but it's 100 grand if you order it right now. I felt like having that equity was super important. Of course, I ordered everything that I could possibly get, which was quad motor. Then they took that away. The power tonneau cover, then they took that away. Then the camp kitchen, they took that away. So it's not exactly the truck I ordered, but that's not to say I'm unhappy with it. But living in Michigan, having cold temperatures, also just considering that battery degradation is a thing. I travel long distances. I had a Model Y, just sold that got 330 miles of range. And we have a Model S that gets, now with the degradation, that's a road trip car. It's got almost 100,000 miles on it. And it's, I think, 268 miles when it's fully charged. But when it originally came out, it's a 2016 Model S, it had 300. So just knowing like the degradation, and Tesla is like some of the best on the market for that, degradation, winter, just all those kinds of losses, and me road tripping all the time. I knew I wanted to have something more than 300 miles of range. Plus, I almost always have my bike rack on the back because I do my e-bike reviews. So I'm always bringing my e-bikes all over the place. I'm going to pick one up in Florida, actually, which is why I brought it with me. Fun. But considering all those losses for the things that I do and go to remote places and go hiking and backpacking and all this stuff, I knew I wanted to have that bigger battery pack. So for me, It was worth it.
No, I love it. I love all the details that you're adding. And yeah, so you have the Rivian R1T with the Max Pack performance dual motor, and you have the 21-inch wheels. So it's all about efficiency there, right? And so I'm assuming that's why you like you said, you added everything you could at the beginning. And then now, as things changed within Rivian, some things became unavailable, some things just changed and you had to pivot. And I know that the Max Pack was a little bit... Yeah, go ahead.
It's expensive for what it is, yes, but they tried to shake me off so many times. And I know all of the people that were on Max Pack, they've tried to, because they're like, look, you can take delivery in 1 week on this large pack. This waving it right in front of me, like, you can have one right now. And I'm like, yes, I do want one right now, but I want to wait because I want to hold on to this. So of course, they're going to do whatever they can for their shareholders and cost cutting as far as like money lost on every unit they make. But I knew that that's what I wanted out of this. If I was going to buy it, I'm not buying another 300-mile range pickup truck. Give me something that has more range, considering my lifestyle, that's going to fit best.
Exactly. You made the choice that was available to get the best range. So I see, I mean, of course, that's your main motivator. And of course, we know the range anxiety that exists in general with EVs. So this is an option that you were able to take advantage of. And this trip that you've driven just now, and then of course, you're going on many more, but you drove 618 miles total, right? And you talked about the settings that you had, you keep all your data, which is great. So you had the all-purpose mode and the auto suspension adjustment. So I love that intention. And you noted an efficiency of about 2.18 miles per kilowatt hour, which, I mean, how do you feel about that?
It's not that great, but also considering that it was cold when I left for the beginning part of it, and it was mostly highway miles. I mean, leaving everything in an auto type mode, I think, is the most realistic expectation for most. So I can't imagine, it's going to be obviously worse when I put my bike on the back and stuff like that. But this is, again, why I got the Max Pack, because I'm already accounting for those losses already. So I had to stop quite a bit when I made the same trip from Michigan to Florida last year in my Model Y. I had to stop several more times because I had two of my e-bikes on the back. So it just proves to me that now, if I do have my bikes on the back and all the load that I carry with me, and I'm going to do the things that I normally do throughout my life, then this is going to be like the perfect balance that I'm looking for. Although it's not, I'm like a huge efficiency stan, and all the people that already follow me know that. Like, it really makes me upset that there's like 200 kilowatt hour battery packs. So like, I didn't really want a 180 kilowatt hour battery pack out of the Rivian because I wanted them to engineer it so that it was more efficient. But, you know, this is the only 400-mile range EV on the market that fits my lifestyle. So,
right.
I mean, you know,
yeah, this choice does make sense. And taking it out on the road is pretty exciting. Now you're going to be able to like live it in the road trip version with these specific specs. And I know along your way, you said you had a lot of successful charging sessions, which is great with EA. And then also I wanted to note this one experience along the way that was kind of interesting to me, where you stopped at a hotel and you're like, yes, great. We're going to have charging there overnight. We'll plug it in. But when you got there, you seem to have some issues where not only did the breakers trip, and you write about these in your tweets, so make sure to follow Miss GoElectric on Twitter or X, because you document your experiences a lot. But also, of course, there were non-EVs parked in the spaces. And I wanted to bring this up because the question of the infrastructure, of course, when we're talking about the ecosystem of EVs, is not always up to the major players providing the public EV charging, but those smaller site hosts like hotels and retail stores that have the responsibility of maintaining and managing the chargers. It doesn't seem that hard to do, but probably involves a lot of good training and information sharing and even maybe incentives for site hosts. And I was wondering, you know, do you agree? What did that experience kind of shine a light on for you in this space?
Well, typically, this is one of the reasons why I love road tripping in an EV, is because I can have the experience be very similar to what I have at home by plugging into a level 2 station at a hotel overnight and getting my full charge, which just makes it so convenient. Like, if you're road tripping, I don't want to have to stop at as many DC fast chargers if I don't have to. And that's good for a number of reasons. One, like, yeah, maybe I do need to stop because I need to use the restroom, but if it's matching the dwell time that I'm already experiencing as far as, you know, having to eat or use the restroom and matching my charging with that, then fine, that's great. But I don't want it to inconvenience me. And so I usually find that hotel charging is extremely reliable because, as one of my favorite EV females in the business, her name is Kitty Adams, she runs Adopt a Charger. She says it's just the level 2 stations are just a glorified outlet. And it's so true, because it just works a lot of cases. And some of them are internet connected and can be a little funky. But generally speaking, when you just have a level 2 that you plug in and it works and you charge up overnight, it's wonderful. But this hotel had about 15 dispensers. And most of them were Tesla stations, actually. And there were 2 that weren't. They were like an off-brand charging station. I went to go initially plug into the off-brand one. And this was kind of my bad, sort of, because I'm so used to just plugging in and the car and the charger work together to figure out what it needs to do. But I should drop the amperage on my truck. So I was set to the max amperage of 48 when I went to go plug in, and it tripped the breaker because and it was, as you can imagine, very dark out when I got there and not a lot of lighting. So then I was trying to like read the side of it. I'm like, what does it say? You know, like, and I didn't know if it would reset itself, or when I went in to talk to the lady, I'm like, yeah, the charging station, it had a power fault, so it tripped. And she's like, I don't even know how to do anything with those. So, and half of the Tesla ones were completely down. And that was the reason why as well. They didn't know how to reset the breaker. So that was quite frustrating. And then to me, you know, you get hotels that are probably thinking, well, I'm not getting my return on investment because people aren't utilizing these stations. But it's really only because, and I didn't book this hotel, but Tim did, and he didn't check the plug share before, which usually we do. And it was kind of split. I think it was rated at like 6.2 or something like that. But he figured, you know, there's enough chargers there's probably going to be some that work.
Right.
Ultimately, yeah. And ultimately, she just didn't know anything about it. But hotels, if you want your return on investment, you got to make sure they're operational and they're working. So I went to go plug into one of the Tesla ones that was still up with my adapter that I have. And Tim was also, because he drove his Model S down as well, he plugged into one. And so he was pulling just fine. And I dropped my amperage down to like something like way low that I knew it was going to be totally fine. Well, it wasn't totally fine because in the middle of the night, I got up to about 53% state of charge. And mind you, I plugged in with 25%. And both of ours just stopped charging in the middle of the night. And so that was interesting. And I was like, okay, I was still pulling like a kilowatt when I got to my truck in the morning, which was so strange. And he was just completely out. But to me, it's like, hotels need to do a better job, especially with all of these news stories that we're seeing that they're making these partnerships with other charging infrastructure companies, that they really need to get their act together when training or talking to and knowing the protocol. Just having like a place where they can go in a binder or something like that and say, okay, this is what I do, or this is what I need to know about this, because that's what I base booking my hotels on. I won't go to or stay at a hotel if it doesn't have EV charging. It's very rare that I do, because I want that convenience. So I think that's like a huge takeaway, is for those hotel brands to really get that experience. And maybe they need to have like an EV day where they show people like how this experience is. Because I do think EV owners understand it, but people who've never been in an EV, which is the majority of people, they don't even know the struggle or the like reality of the situation. So
I completely agree. I think there's such a challenge here with getting information out there, because there's a lack of experience in general, which is completely understandable. And then if we're going to make things work in any kind of business model, like, yes, hotels need to think about EV charging too. And somehow, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how we're able to tackle that, because even some dealerships need more information. And it's like, that's the source of, don't get me started on that. That's my job of going into dealers and training them and educating them about EV charging and stuff like that. And that is a very frustrating process, because the turnover is extremely high in a dealership. So when you even go in to train a dealer, the next time you go into that dealer, you're not going to see the majority of those same faces. So it's like a never ending battle of trying to get people on board. And that's very frustrating. Trust me. Very frustrating. Yeah, I can imagine you have.
I know very well experience.
That business. Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely a really interesting question, and hopefully, maybe we could just clone you and then send you all out to educate everyone possible. But that seems to be something that needs to happen. It's just a generalized effort.
There needs to be a complete shift at the OEM level, where they are not only training their dealers, they're also training their employees in a more meaningful, impactful way. Because even when you go in dealership, like, there needs to be some kind of fundamental event where they can really get a hands-on, long-term like experience, like with an EV. Because most of these guys don't, even though they have EVs that they could take home, sometimes they do, and sometimes they like run out of charge. And to me, it's like, huh? Like, how are you doing this? Like, you have a charging station at your workplace. You don't live that far, but then you still, there's just a lot of little things that it's obvious to you and I and to people that are in this niche, but they really need more tangible, like user-friendly ways and analogies to understand what is actually going on and how to apply that to their everyday use. So
I completely agree.
A lot of people can use that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot of disconnect here. Maybe it's that the technology has advanced quite quickly, and it's not just everyone's taking it up. Really, it's kind of a little bit of a forced revolution, but it's happening. And I know that you have a lot to add on that, and I would love to dive into that with you on other topics too. And just to bring it back to the Rivian, because that is what we're talking about today. You have had this road trip, and what are your we've gone over the specs and stuff. You're going to keep taking notes as you continue to road trip. But do you have any major takeaways that you've been noodling on since you got to sit behind the wheel of your R1T with the Max Pack and gone a good number of miles in a row now?
Yeah, definitely the huge thing as far as efficiency goes is that the cabin heating is not efficient, which I did know. But hopefully Rivian can make some improvements to help and change things in the future to include a heat pump that would, help maximize the range on it. I know that's a lot of engineering to do though. As far as like the driving experience, there are quite a few things that I am either used to in my Model Y that this doesn't have, or things that I do like that this, the experience this provides that the Model Y didn't. This is a very quiet truck. I think they have a lot of work to do. As far as the advanced driver assist systems, the highway drive assist is, it needs some work. Although I enjoy it when it is working. It is, it's in the name, you can only use it on the highway. And, it's not as advanced as some other systems from just economy brands that I'm used to. So like, to me, if you're spending X amount of dollars on a truck like this, then it should have certain things that you're used to as a like luxury or premium space buyer, competing in the like BMW, Mercedes territory. Understanding that it is a startup though, it is, you have some leeway with that. And there are other really amazing things about it. But just like a simple thing for me, that's a huge deal is that this doesn't have voice to text. It can't read text messages to me and I can't deliver text messages through my voice commands. And to me, in a state where it is illegal to have any kind of interaction with your phone that's not hands-free while you're driving, is kind of, and I know that we're not the only state that has that law. Seems like a safety concern to me that they should prioritize. And I'm kind of surprised that, waiting from the first deliveries to this point that they haven't gotten that figured out. So it's just things like that. And then the driver assistance, I think, needs some work. Otherwise, it's amazing sound system. I wish some of the interface was a little bit different for my liking, but some of that's personal preference and some of it's just development of the interface. So they, are still relatively new, and I'm sure they're working behind the scenes very diligently to try to get those things out. But yes, I have a lot of suggestions.
Yes, I love it.
Because I've driven a lot of cars, a lot of brands, and I've, I feel like I have a good take on that. And I'm an ADAS stan, I would call myself, because every chance I get, I use it. I use all the systems that I possibly can. And I spent earlier on the year with the Nissan Ariya, and that has a new ProPilot Assist system where it was basically I could take my hands off the wheel on the highways. And when I would use that all the time. I loved it. I loved that system. So if it could get closer to something like that, or I'm sure people familiar with the Blue Cruise or Super Cruise, those kinds of things, even FSD to an extent, that'd be one. I feel like it's a very basic system the way it is now.
Yeah, I do love that their approach has been to continue to, of course, a lot of things have happened, but like take input and then input it into their systems. But it has been slow going. And it does seem like some of the things you pointed out would just be, safety for one. Yeah, that you're able to tell your phone what you want to do. Even my car does that. And it's, quite an older car. So interesting points you make. And I think you really, are able to spend time with the car. And because of your experience, really pinpoint those things that would make it, not even perfect. You're not asking for a ton, at every level, but great observations. And would you recommend, you waited for the Max Pack. This is really what you wanted. Would you recommend it to other folks who are able to take advantage of that opportunity and really want the long range? Or do you think, you could go with the long range pack. You don't need the Max Pack. What do you think?
Every answer is going to be very highly dependent on everyone's specific needs. So it's hard to give a blanket answer because, for my lifestyle, it was yes, I was willing to pay the extra money for it. Although it's different price now at this stage, it is a little bit harder to justify. But if you, if you need that range because of, the degradation, the cold weather, the things that you haul, like all of these things considered, then I so far am having a really great experience with it. And I think that it's worth it. But if you don't have that lifestyle, you don't need it, you don't go to remote places, and you don't want to use your truck to charge your e-bikes out in the woods and all these all these use cases, then I would say, the average person, their daily commute in the United States is between 30 and 40 miles a day. And, so a large pack is going to do the job. But, for me, for my specific use case, I know I'm not a typical person in that regard. I think it's worth it. But again, I got the discount. So I probably, honestly, I know it's like too much. It's hard to say, but at this point, I probably still would get the Max Pack, because that 410 miles of range is also going to save me time on road trips, and time is money at the same time. So people have to really just decide for themselves, really figure out what you do and what you're going to be using this for, and determine whether or not that extra cost is going to be worth it for you.
I totally agree. There's a lot of research that goes into going electric, and a lot of it is really figuring out, who am I as a driver? What do I really need? What do I think are what I want, and what is really what I do on the day-to-day and the most part. So I love that perspective, and I really appreciate it, because I think it's kind of been, a lot of people have been commenting I don't know if I should get the Max Pack. Should I add it on? I'm not sure. So I think your experience can definitely shine some light into that, and I really appreciate it. And I know that you have to get back on the road and continue with your awesome work, and I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast. And before I let you go, I want to know if you have any projects coming up that you're especially excited about and that our audience can keep an eye out for.
Well, definitely, like you mentioned before, I'll be posting another thread on X for my road trip down to Florida and back. And that's actually going to be a rather quick trip. So I'll have a lot of charging within the next 2-3 day period over that weekend of November 3rd to the 5th or something like that. So definitely keep an eye on there. And then I have a ton of YouTube videos coming up. So, and more recently, I've been splitting up my channel into different segments, because as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I cover electric bikes, electric scooters. I do industry interviews. There's a lot of different things that I do, but I've over the time, and I've pretty much have said this to a lot of people, even like Kyle, I need to split up the channel. It's just a matter of doing it. And ultimately, so we are doing that. I have an e-bike buying guide coming out before Black Friday. So if you are shopping for the holidays for an e-bike, I'll have some good tips for you to find there. And that's on the Miss GoElectric Ride Reviews channel. But I have the Miss GoElectric Industry channel and the plain Miss GoElectric channel right now. We'll see how many more I end up doing, but that seems to be a good track record. And then, of course, for every Fridays, I'll be on the Inside EVs podcast that I can. So
great. Yeah. So everyone make sure to check that out. And I would love to, I could spend so much time talking to you about just the, how are we going to go electric? What are the keys to pushing electric mobility and learning about e-bikes? But I will save those questions for another day. But believe me, I am holding back asking them, because I have to continue on. But yeah, I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, Laycee, and really appreciate your expertise and your experience here, and the fact that, you are such a skilled communicator in what you do. Obviously, that's your job. And I think that's so key in this space, to be able to share ideas with people, to have discussions, to debate, to investigate as well. So I really appreciate the work that you do, and for taking the time to come onto the podcast today.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you inviting me to kind of have this conversation about this experience, because a lot of people have been very curious about Max Pack, and there's more to come. So don't worry. And we got to make a time where we meet up on the weekend while I'm in Tennessee so that we can hang out.
I would love that so much. Definitely. If you enjoyed, audience, let us know. Of course, go follow Laycee. If you have any questions for her, add them here, and I'll let her team know that anything was asked. But yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on to the podcast. And of course, everyone, thank you for tuning in, and catch us next time on the Out of Spec Podcast.
Thanks, guys.